There are few, if any, people who've contributed more to developing and guiding and growing the BDS movement around the world, and I can't even count the number of times that Omar has offered strategic advice and support to the US campaign and really to groups all around the country and all around the world. I don't know how many hours he has in a day, but it's incredible everything that he does. And to me personally and many others, he's been a real inspiration. So we're really honored to have him facilitating the panel, and I'll let him take it from here.
Thanks a lot, Anna. Okay, we have a great panel. I'll spend very little time talking so that our speakers will do most of the talking. I just want to say something in the beginning. As a representative of the Palestinian leadership of the BDS campaign, the Boycott National Committee, or BNC, we're thrilled to see how much BDS work has grown in this country and how much the US campaign in particular is playing a key role in this. We have many allies and partners in the US, but our most important strategic ally is clearly the US campaign as a coalition of hundreds of groups working for Palestinian rights based on international law and universal principles of human rights. We see the US campaign's work as extremely strategic, extremely important for everything for Palestine, especially for the BDS campaign. So a round of applause for the US campaign. And just a couple of years ago, BDS, or 3 years ago, BDS was still on the fringe, largely, in the US. You had to be really radical to commit to BDS. Very few groups were committed then, but look where we are now. So it has really mushroomed, and thanks to many people in this room and others outside this room who have done just a great job. Okay, so I'll introduce all the panelists, and then we'll have each one speak very briefly, 6 to 8 minutes, and Anna will hold them accountable to that. You have to be very efficient. Dr. Dalit Baum, on the right, not politically, but where she's certainly not politically, is a feminist scholar and co-founder of Who Profits from the Occupation, an activist research initiative of the Coalition of Women for Peace in Israel that has become a vital resource for corporate accountability campaigns around the world, providing information about corporate complicity in the occupation. This year, Dalit is working with Global Exchange on a new program entitled Economic Activism for Palestine, which aims to support existing campaigns in the US as well as help new ones through education, training, networking, and so on. Rebecca Subar teaches Peace and Conflict Studies at Westchester University and holds a master's in public administration from the Harvard Kennedy School. She's a board member of Jewish Voice for Peace and advises official and unofficial political change makers on dealing with conflict and organizational challenges. Dr. Hatem Bazian will not be with us. He was unable to make it, unfortunately, due to some emergency. Then we have Tory Smith, is a Peace and Global Studies major at Earlham College and one of the heads of the BDS Earlham's coordinating committee. He served as an interim with the BDS National Committee in Ramallah. We loved having him. He did great work there, following a semester studying Arabic at Birzeit University. And then we have the famous Nancy Kricorian, who doesn't need introduction, but she's the manager of the Stolen Beauty Ahava boycott campaign, otherwise known as Miss Twitter, and has worked for CODEPINK Women for Peace for 8 years. Her novels, Isabel, Dreams of Bread and Fire, and the forthcoming All the Light There Was, are published by Grove Atlantic. And in 2010, she traveled through the West Bank as part of the Palestine Festival of Literature. And then we have Andrew Kadi, is a human rights activist and new media specialist at a non-profit, currently serving on the steering committee of the US campaign. Andrew has been published in The Guardian, Mondevice, and Front Plaza, among others. And then, last but not least, David Wildman is Executive Secretary for Human Rights and Racial Justice with the United Methodist Church's General Board of Global Ministries. He helped found the US campaign back in 2001 and continues to serve on its steering committee. He's co-chair of the US campaign now. David co-authored with fellow US campaign steering committee member Phyllis Dennis, Ending the US War in Afghanistan, a primer, January 2010. Wildman is active in an ecumenical group of religious shareholders seeking to end corporate complicity in Israel's military occupation and other systematic human rights violations. He serves on the World Council of Churches Palestine Israel Ecumenical Forum Core Group, holds both an MDiv, that's Divinity Studies I found out, and MPhil in Social Ethics from Union Theological Seminary, and formerly facilitated Justice and Peace seminars at the Church Center for the UN. So without further ado, we'll start with Dalit, 6 to 8 minutes. And afterwards we'll have breakout sessions, and Anna will tell us more about those sessions where everyone goes. Thanks.
Thank you, Omar. I will start with the popcorn session we had earlier. I think that it is a good way for me to explain why I think that one of our biggest challenges right now is how to move towards the local. BDS campaign, in my eyes, strategically should be local. There is something about BDS that calls for local accountability. We are moving with the call for BDS from trying to change things through convincing people into trying to change things by putting pressure on institutions. And in order to put effective pressure on institutions, we need to be close to them. We need to be able to actually influence institutions in our own community. We have a lot of experience dealing with global issues on a national level, especially Israel-Palestine over here. It seems like something that needs to be done with national organizations or in Washington, foreign policy work and so on. So we have a lot of local groups that have a lot of experience doing work with national organizations. So they lead national days of action, they sign petitions, they follow prescribed actions and targets from national organizations. But some of our challenges now is to get some of these local groups also to take on local campaigns that are truly local, that are indicative of local needs in the community, of local issues and things that people can connect to locally. I have to say this is all a new topic for me, and I'm sure most of you are experts on that much more than I am, because I'm coming from a very small country where the local is also the national, which is also the global and the internet, you know, or the trans-global, I don't know. But for me, this is a really revelation, coming here and really realizing how big this country is and how disempowering it is for activists over here, I don't know, who are not in Washington or New York City. But there are some really good, successful local campaigns, and the goal is to learn from them and also to offer whatever we can in support and services to other local groups that need to start such local campaigns. So let me tell you about some of the challenges that I've encountered so far meeting with local groups around the country. First of all, you get to a community and people are involved in the discussion around BDS. So this is one misconception, I think, very wide misconception, that people all have to endorse a call or agree on some. I think we are very well adept with the discussion around one state, two states, return, not return, blah, 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 and people just go into the BDS thing as another educational issue. Let's go and educate our community about how BDS is good. This is important. I think people should do that, but I really also want them to start doing BDS. That means taking on a local campaign that targets one of the institutions that they are involved in locally. So actually tracing lines of accountability from their own community to the Israeli apartheid, the exploitation, colonization, occupation. And that means looking into investments, looking into local products, looking into local institutions, local events, whatever they can. And that means doing a lot of research. That's another level that sometimes is missing, because when people rely on research on Palestine done elsewhere, they don't have a lot of research capacity locally. And back in Global Exchange with our research group, it's called the Bay Searchers, we're trying to support local groups in doing local research, to find out more about what is happening locally, or to help them figure out how to do that. We cannot do that for them. Another, of course, misconception is that BDS is boycott, divestment, sanctions. It's a very common misconception. And that this is a list of prescribed actions. You know, you should do boycott. And so wherever I go, people ask for a list of consumer products to boycott. Where is the boycott list? Hand up, you know. So there is a prescribed action. Everybody should boycott these products and so on. Most of the products lists that are circulating around the country are useless locally. because they are very local. And they really are about specific products that are sold someplace and not other place, and useful products in one place and not another. And the idea is to do effective pressure on institutions. Effective pressure means also picking effective targets. So some targets are really effective in one place and very, very much useless in another place. And it's not about just pulling away from buying these products, therefore we belong to the movement and our hands are clean. It's just the opposite. It's about tracing our accountability. So finding a product that is meaningful in our community so we can actually make the link to Palestine, Israel. And this is how it also connects to the other campaign of stopping US military aid to Israel and so on. And this is how we can actually educate people that what is going on in Israel is going on in Israel because of the consistent support from over here. Another thing I wanted to say about the misconception, the last one, is an obvious one. I keep saying that, but there is a very long misconception about Israel versus the occupation. If you boycott Israel, this is much more radical than boycotting the occupation. We have been investigating that for years. We have so many ways of showing it now in the cultural level, in the economic level, in the political level, on so many levels that the entire Israeli economic system is deeply involved in the occupation of Palestine, in settlements activity. In fact, when different organizations took on boycotting the occupation, they have taken on much more than just boycotting Israel. That means boycotting all the main institutions in Israel, as well as the internationals that support the occupation, which is bigger than just Israel. This is a bigger commitment. You should know that. And the last minute I want to dedicate to the campaign that we want to push in this US campaign meeting, which is a campaign against Veolia. Veolia is one of the first global campaigns of the BDS movement. It is an amazing campaign because it's global, it's national, and it's local. Veolia is a company that is involved in settlement services in the West Bank, but it's also involved in services in many, many small communities across the US. They provide waste, water, transportation, and energy services to many, many places around the country. And that makes them a very, very good target for local organizing. If they have a contract in your community, you can try and organize to educate around this contract, maybe get them to not get the contract renewed. If they don't have a contract in your community, you can pass resolutions saying that your community is Veolia free, and thus join dozens of cities and towns around the world that are Veolia free. You can hear more about it later or in a dedicated workshop that I'm giving about Veolia tomorrow. Thank you.
Hi, folks. It's great that everybody's here doing this work together. So this connects. They all connect. I'm here to talk about We Divest. It's at wedivest.org if you want to look for more of it. And this is an octopus of a campaign that is about divestment from TIAA-CREF. What is that? And Anna is going to breeze through some slides, and I can kind of see them out of the corner of my eye, so I'll be winking. We're improvising. Great. So the TIAA-CREF campaign is a campaign to get a very big financial investment company, and half of you just went blank, so let me explain what we're talking about, to divest from the occupation. TIAA-CREF is a huge investment company which many people in this room will have some retirement funds in. How many people here have some of their own money, or some family member has some of their own funds in TIAA-CREF? So people are raising their hands, and you can take a look around and see that it connects to our communities ourselves in this way. The investment portfolio of TIAA-CREF includes, excellent, thank you. So you can keep spinning, Anna. Right? Yeah, go for it. Yes. So that's what TIAA-CREF is. And basically, and you can go again, the investments the TIAA-CREF has include over $12 million in Veolia. And it includes $2 million in Elbit, which we're looking at right here. Veolia is the next slide. It has $111 million and change invested in Motorola. It has over $177 million invested in Northrop Grumman, and over $216 million in our favorite traditionally, company to divest from, Caterpillar. So the goals of the campaign are twofold, and there are two distinct tracks that are intertwined. One of them is the policy change, actually getting TIAA-CREF to divest, and the other one is growing the movement that we are part of and that goes obviously way beyond this room. The first policy success that we imagine is going to happen later. It might be 3 to 5 years from now, but that will happen when Caterpillar is dropped from maybe not all of TIAA-CREF funds, but they have a list of funds, and they have one called the Social Something or Other Fund, and that's the one we're looking at. But in the meantime, it's a complex and big, I said octopus, I don't know if that's a good image, but it's got many places for groups to plug into. And so, Anna, I think you can, so like one important thing to note up here is that the people who are actually investors are employees typically of hospitals and universities, and they would be like a huge overlap with the kind of people that we might be able to recruit to the movement anyway. So that's a pretty cool thing. So now we're going to talk about how we actually have an impact in TIAA-CREF, and before we do that, I just want to tell you who it is that we're talking about that's doing this work. The work is led by Jewish Voice for Peace. There are a lot of people in this room who are very significantly involved in it. I made a list of them, and it was most of you, so I'm not going to name you, but I'll name the organizations. There's a very strong collaboration that's been built over the past year and a half, which includes Adala New York, the U.S. campaign, USPCN, which is the Palestine Community Network, the American Friends Service Committee, AFSC, Grassroots International, and Dalit's corporate accountability campaigns absolutely tie in. And I also want to sort of shout out once more to you, Omar, to the Boycott National Committee in general, but in particular to the support that you've given to Rebecca Vilkomerson, my namesake, who's the executive director of JVP, because you've really put energy behind the campaign. There are also church groups, divestment projects that pre-existed, and they go alongside and feed into. So what Dalit's talking about, and when all the Caterpillar work that's happened, et cetera, this all feeds into this larger campaign. How many minutes do I have left? 4. Oh, that's great. Okay, let me talk about the strategy. That's the colorful slide, Anna, that comes next. So there are two things happening, like I said. The movement building strategy is absolutely intertwined with the policy change, but it's especially potent because TIAA-CREF doesn't exist in like Atlanta or Toledo. It exists in 60 cities. It exists on the campuses of everybody who invests. So Earlham College probably has its investments and its retirement funds in TIAA-CREF. The students and faculty on that campus are connected, but TIAA-CREF itself has 60 locations across the country where you can do local work. So on this beautiful screen, thank you, Sydney, who's the strategist. We have a picture of the leverage points, and the one thing I want to show you is that there are 5 squares of color here that are putting pressure on TIAA-CREF, influencing TIAA-CREF to change its policy. And I'm going to tell you a little about them, but what you should note is that even though each one has its own arrow going into TIAA-CREF and making a change, they're completely interchanged. They completely relate to each other, and there should be, if it weren't so complicated visually, arrows all over the screen. The green boxes are clients. So that consists of client organizations like the hospital that you work at or Earlham College. It includes the faculty on campus or the employees themselves, or the students on campus who have influence on the investments that are made by their boards of regents. And those are the kind of places where the pressure and there are church groups also in there, and that's obviously really important here. And all of those green boxes are the places that TIAA-CREF has actually told the leadership of the campaign, we pay attention there. We really want the conversations on campuses and among church groups and in the large churches to be positive about TIAA-CREF, because TIAA-CREF is known as being a socially responsible and socially conscious investor. I personally am an investor as a professor, and I like the idea that my funds are with TIAA-CREF, and because they divested from South Africa, I'm confident that we'll get there too. The red box is about the companies like Veolia and Northrop Grumman and Caterpillar, et cetera, the 5 companies that we're particularly targeting for disinvestment. And so they form as good a target as TIAA-CREF itself, or as the campuses, or organizing on campuses for signatures that then target boards of regents, or that directly target the companies. And then finally, the most confusing bit of this to understand is the yellow box, which is this group, which I'm trying to understand. There's a group of entities or people called socially responsible investors, and Dalit, actually you know about this, but these people sort of guide socially responsible investors on what to include and what not to include, and so we're obviously trying to put pressure on them too. A couple of things I want to highlight that that are very exciting include there have been a couple of national days of action this year, but one of them happened in Charlotte because the TIAA-CREF people felt enough pressure already from work that we've been doing on all these fronts that they moved their shareholder meeting from New York to more obscure Charlotte. When Desmond Tutu, on behalf of the campaign, wrote an op-ed in the Charlotte Observer, it got feedback from the Jerusalem Post. That was a nice high-profile thing. Movement building in turn. The AFSC, the American Friends Service Committee, is the first client organization that's actually divested, which is amazing. And there's a committee developing a strategy to reach out to the next set of clients who would be in the category of AFSC, sort of exciting, kick-ass, we're proud of them kind of organizations. There's a campaign in a box that for those who are on their campuses trying to figure out what to do, NYU has given the campaign a lot of good feedback about how, gosh, we're reaching out like crazy because we don't have to do the initial research or even create organizing materials because they're all here. I don't have time to go into all of the cool things that have happened, but I will say one more thing that I think is very cool, which is that the big rating agency that actually indexes the companies for like goodness or badness in the world is called MSCI, and Caterpillar is one notch beneath maximum badness, and that's because of the work that we've done. So that's really cool. A lot of other good things in movement building, but in the next year we'll have another shareholder resolution, since this year's obviously didn't quite get there. We'll have a day of action at 60 offices. We'll bird dog the leadership of TIAA-CREF wherever they make public appearances, and we'll build on the potential that we built here, which can connect in many ways with lots of the other work that you're doing. So, Yahoo. I'm done. 9, 10. Is that closer? I got 10.
You should just raise your hand. I have a bit of a cold right now, so you should raise your hand if you can't actually hear me. I guess first off, I just want to give a big shout out to all the students in the house right now. So as Omar was describing earlier, for 30 seconds I'm going to talk about my work I did with the BNC, which I was compiling basically the first list of the history of BDS and the successes that we've had. And I would just say going through 64 pages of single-spaced Word document in 12-point font on that is awesome. So just kind of like looking back at the history, I would just say props to everybody in this room for making that happen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Earlham College. How many of you know where Earlham is? All right, awesome. For those of you who don't, there's a little state called Indiana. It's in the middle of the country. And we are a small liberal arts school in a kind of working-class Rust Belt town. And basically, our school has been very famous for kind of taking a stand on social justice issues and that kind of thing, and kind of being on the leading edge of that. So we're very excited for this opportunity to kind of take a leading role in the realm of campus divestment in the first place. And there's a couple things working in our favor, and the first one is kind of the whole topic of ethical investment that Dalit was talking about, which is that our school already has an ethical investment screen related to human rights. For some mysterious reason, this doesn't seem to apply to Israel, so we're working on trying to make that happen right now, trying to kind of draw the connection between the two. The other thing is that, like the message that I would like to leave with y'all, how many of you are involved in university-type communities? That could be even living in the direct area. The thing about running a student-based campaign is your campaign leaders have 4 years and then they're gone. A lot of these campaigns are based around the longevity of people who are not students taking an interest in this and supporting them and providing that kind of knowledge base and that background to be able to say, this is what happened 5-6 years ago, and this is how the students reacted and that kind of thing. So I would really encourage you who do live in university communities to please get involved with your local SJPs and other groups that are working on these issues and that kind of thing, so you can provide that knowledge base, because we're really lacking it right now, and we would really appreciate some help on that. One of the interesting things about being a student group, especially in the university, is versus a trade union or other kind of investment thing, there is a kind of built-in resistance source in it in the form of the Jewish Student Union on campus, which can also be a source of great strength depending on kind of the political leanings of those two groups. And so basically what we've been trying to do is trying to engage in some kind of public dialogue where we can kind of talk about a lot of kind of the underlying myths behind why Israel deserves U.S. money and U.S. support and all this stuff, because it's not something that if you asked the majority of Israeli supporters why they felt the way they do, once they kind of got past the beginning part, they would say, I can't say exactly why, I just feel it. And so talking to that and really kind of trying to kind of like smash that kind of like underlying gut feeling is something that we've been trying to kind of work on as the kind of final step for our BDS campaign. The other thing that we've been kind of considering, and I think that should be a conversation that should happen on a wider campus level, is what the campus divestment movement has as a place in the larger BDS movement as a whole, and how we can kind of work together to support each other, and that kind of thing. I've not really kind of received any concrete answers on that, but I would be really interested to kind of hear examples of the way that campuses are sources of strength for the BDS movement and kind of can provide that kind of like younger creative bent to a lot of BDS campaigns and stuff that have been kind of happening recently. The other argument that has been kind of coming up that we've been working really hard to kind of work with now is the economy. Everybody's talking about it, and talking about the ways that the economy and the economic situation that we're in right now are affecting our campuses and that kind of thing, and providing economic relief for students depends on having a healthy endowment. And if you are challenging that endowment or asking it to be have money moved around and that kind of thing, you are challenging basically the ability of some of your friends to go to school and that kind of thing. And so that is an argument that we've been trying to struggle against, showing that no, you can actually, there is a way to participate in the kind of endowment investment community without having to enter into complicity with Israeli war crimes and that kind of thing. So it's really kind of trying to show that divesting from the Israeli occupation does not mean kind of immediate bankruptcy and you can't invest in anything. And I'll just I'll leave you guys with our WordPress website. We have a petition up there. We would totally appreciate your support if you would be willing to sign it, or if some of you would be willing to come to our campus to talk. We have limited funds available for speakers and that kind of thing. So we can, if you want to approach me after the plenary session, come up. Our website address is bdsearlham.wordpress.net. And we'd appreciate all the help that you can give us. Thank you.
So you want to get the PowerPoint? Okay. Hit it. So I was tasked with talking about the creative actions and techniques that we've been using to get press attention for the Ahava boycott campaign. How many people here are already familiar with the campaign? Okay, pretty much everybody. So I'm not going to do the history of the campaign or, our strategy, long-term strategy, I'm just going to talk about the creative techniques that we use. I think the first thing was coming up with a name for the campaign, Stolen Beauty, which sort of like encapsulates what it is that we're trying to say about this cosmetics company and where they source their materials, where the products are made. You can go to the next. And this next, they've just rebranded their line. These are the new mud product line right here. And the thing we can say about the mud is that we know that the mud is, through Who Profits and Marav, who's Dalit's colleague, we have documentary evidence that they actually sourced the mud from the occupied shores of the Dead Sea near the settlement of Kalia. So, next one. Oh, closer to the microphone. I just wanted everybody to see the map that we have right there, and you can see the West Bank is in pink, and the little star. I can't. I'm trying to say. There's. Yeah. So Mitzvah Kalia is where the mud is sourced, and then Mitzvah Shalem is where the factory is. So the factory is in the illegal settlement of Mitzvah Shalem, and all the products are labeled product of Israel. What am I doing? Okay, I just went cross-eyed, but it's okay. They're actually made in the occupied West Bank in this illegal settlement. So if we go to the next. So the first thing that we did was, got us a lot of publicity. That's Kristen Davis, right? I can't see it, right? Yeah, okay. So Sex and the City star Kristen Davis was working as the spokesmodel for Ahava, and she was also working as a goodwill ambassador for Oxfam. And Oxfam has an explicit policy against settlement products, so we were able to get people to start contacting Oxfam and saying, how can you be against settlement products and have a goodwill ambassador who is actually shilling for settlement products? So we went, she was just, doing a publicity event at Lord & Taylor in New York, and we went in and went up to her with a letter and asked her, how can you let them use your beautiful name, your beautiful face and your good name, to whitewash the crimes of what's going on in this illegal settlement industry. She was not very happy to see us. We were kicked out of the store. Unfortunately, we had to buy $40 worth of the product to get near her. But those are the prices you pay sometimes. But we got so much press for this. I was on the phone with page 6 of the New York Post, which is the gossip column. And I was saying to them, you have 24 hours to run this story or I'm taking it elsewhere. And they're like, please, can we have 48? I was like, okay, 48. And so it ran on page 6, and we got so much publicity because it was like on the gossip column. And it was picked up by newspapers all around the world. And then what the coda is that her contract came up for renewal like 2 months later, and she didn't renew it. So then there was a whole other round of publicity about Kristen Davis was dumped by Ahava because of what happened, which probably wasn't the case, but we ran with this publicity for a long time. So the next one. So then, with the launch of the campaign was with an action, you can see Medea there in a bikini. The launch of the campaign was, we did these bikini brigades. We did one in Tel Aviv, then we did one right afterwards at a Tel Aviv beach party they held in Central Park. The other smaller one you see is from one we did a few months ago in New York City, and there's nothing like a bunch of women in bikinis to get a lot of press attention. Okay, next one. So So then we moved on from the bikinis. We were inspired by our friends in the Netherlands that we work with, the bathrobe brigades. They said, in the Netherlands, you really can't walk around in the streets in a bikini, so we're going to use bathrobes. And we said, great idea, because it gets cold in New York, and we don't want to be in bikinis, you know, in the dead of winter, so we started with the bathrobes. That also attracts a lot of attention. Next one. The last one, which is the last one that Kristen in LA, I'm sorry the quality of the photo is not great. We came up with this, she came up with this idea that because Bed Bath & Beyond carries SodaStream and Ahava, not all stores, you have to check the store before you go. Some carry one and some carry the other, and some don't. So we came up with this idea, she came up with this idea of the BDS brides, and they went into the bridal registry at Bed Bath & Beyond and did a wedding ceremony where they pledged not to buy any settlement products, including Ahava and SodaStream. And the online action, I will just say one thing. I'm like the queen of Twitter. I love Twitter, and we did this amazing culture jam on a marketing contest that Ahava and Birchbox were having, and we got hundreds of people around the world jamming their Twitter marketing contest. And I will talk more about that tomorrow in Abe Greenhouse's thing on social media. And that's it. What? Right. And the last thing I was going to say is, even though this is a very high-profile campaign and it seems like one product, it's actually huge. It's a huge campaign. It's sold every place. We need your help. I would love help from everybody here in taking on this company. Thank you very much.
Hello, folks. So, for once, as a Palestinian, I'm going to talk a lot. I would like, everyone's shouting people out. Shout out the Palestinians! Yay! Yay. I also appreciate, by the way, that CODEPINKers are in trouble because you can spot them wherever they are because they're wearing pink. I just wanted to point that out. Anna, bless your heart for opening my 75 links. I would ask that you just don't close them as you go along them in case of anything, and I'll just point at you when we're ready to go. And sometimes that might be one after the other. Are you starting with the video? Or? No, that'll be sort of at the end. I do want to say that when people think of BDS, they think economic, and that's perfectly sort of understandable. You know, as a member of ADALA New York, I was involved in the Leviav campaign, which was largely sort of a consumer/corporate boycott, and it got a lot of media attention, and it had, you know, important successes. It was a great campaign. That said, by the way, I should mention, Dalit, that ADALA New York does have an 11 product flyer, specifically 11 products on their website, and it specifies which are local and which are national, just saying. But really also cultural boycott, which ADALA New York, in fact, has recently decided to focus on even more so than it already has a really significant role. Among other things, it challenges, it has the most significant effect in many ways on the psyche of sort of normality and of invincibility that Israel has, and that's a really important thing. And in addition, among other things, and you know, this came up in a cultural debate the other night, I asked somebody who was arguing against cultural boycott, what are you doing to offset, because she said, I would never boycott Israel or the Palestinians, you know, culturally. And I said, well, that's great, but unfortunately Israel is boycotting the Palestinians culturally, so what are you doing to offset that? And so really that's, among other things, an important reason for the cultural boycott. That said, this cultural boycott and the BDS movement is largely modeled, you know, the modern or contemporary version of the Palestinian BDS movement is modeled after the sort of South African movement. And so in that sense, and Anna, I'm not sure if you're already on the first sort of... Yeah, so as early as the sort of 1960s, and I just wanted to show folks, there was a strong message being relayed to South Africans regarding sport, and that the South African boycott movement sort of formalized around the late 1950s, around 1959, and the cultural element of it actually started to sort of spring up around 1961. Now, so the International Olympic Committee was starting to send messages early on, and we can sort of go through these kind of quickly. you can see sort of that there are, and it's a smaller screen so it's harder to see, but essentially that they were already challenging South Africa's role at the Olympics. And by 1970, the International Olympic Committee sort of ousts South Africa altogether. You know, the article, one of the articles in here says, you know, taking it one step further than 1963, the International Olympic Committee actually withdrew the recognition of the South African Olympic Commission. And why do I bring that up? Because sport was sort of the equivalent of entertainment in its like sort of artistic form in Israel today in a lot of ways. You know, sports was like an integral part of the South African boycott, as well as culture. And in that sense, I would say that you know, by 1981, unions representing 240,000 actors across the U.S. took a unanimous decision that their members shouldn't perform in South Africa, which is pretty significant. And of course, as you all know, by 1985, the famed Sun City song was released with artists that range from Bruce Springsteen to Run DMC, Joey Ramone, and Gil Scott-Heron. And I'm not sure if we're sort of, we can move maybe one more over to that slide. I think you want to go, no, that's okay. And really, I praise Anna for her ability to handle this. So that's another step over. So that's the 1970s decision. Next tab. Here's your sort of the Sun City piece, and Steve Van Zandt, who was involved in this, was sort of praised for deciding to take this position. But now going to the Palestinian issue, a number of artists have been boycotting, I mean, some maybe longer, but really it sort of is on my radar from 06, 07, 08. Bjork, people like Ken Loach, Jean-Luc Godard, and Roger Waters, in fact. And then there are also those sort of soft boycotts. U2's Bono's notable absence from Israel despite a number of invitations. What seems like Oprah's reluctance to travel there. And more importantly, instances where we know for a fact that somebody was boycotting Israel, like Snoop Dogg, who actually canceled his trip there and used business reasons. But it's significant, right? So what did that sort of do to Israeli psyche? And in that sense, ask Anna to, sorry, Anna's managing both time and I would say that there is there are instances where, oh, all right, well there's an instance, for example, where Santana canceled, and what happened? The producers behind it leaked the fact, even though he was doing a soft boycott, that he had in fact canceled because of anti-Israel pressure. And that's sort of where you get into, and I don't know if we're going to have those slides, but we get into Elvis Costello. No, this is in fact right, sort of on point. So Elvis Costello made a statement, I don't know how many of you remember it, that was very powerful and sort of explicitly said that like sometimes it's a political statement to go and perform somewhere, and just as it is to sort of decide not to. And so there's a slew of articles that you can sort of tab through until you get to the forward. I'm trying to make this a little bit easier, and you could see it, but it got wide media coverage. So ultimately, that's okay. So we get to the forward, and that's basically an article about how the cultural boycott has had an effect, but more importantly, notable in that, is that one of the people interviewed, a music industry insider, confirmed, these are the lines from the forward, confirmed that the winds could be shifting. The music executive who spoke on condition of anonymity in light of his ongoing business ties with artists said that in recent months he had approached more than 15 performing artists with proposals to give concerts in Israel. None had agreed. The contracts offered high levels of compensation. He called them, quote, extreme big numbers that could match any other gig. And what he means is the kind of pay that somebody gets for playing in Madison Square Garden. So what does this sort of do? And the forward article has a series of photos. It's like Paul McCartney, it's like Elton John, and then it shows Elvis Costello and Santana and sort of juxtaposing them. What does it do? It frames things as, is this artist willing to go play for Apartheid, or are they not? And that's a really good place to be at, whether they play or not. It's good that that debate is taking place. I'm guessing that we're having problems with the rest of the articles, so I'm gonna, that's fine. So I'm just gonna sort of go through some of the coverage that happened. It is Okay, it's constructive sort of to have campaigns against artists coming to the US, even if, for example, Israeli artists come or artists are going to Israel and they don't succeed. And in that sense, I would say Leonard Cohen, for example, drew lots of criticism and sparked a high-level debate in US media over his decision to go play in Israel. And that's the kind of media we're looking for, and that's the kind of framing we're looking for. Similarly, the Batsheva Dance Company and the Israel Ballet came to New York, and those are the only times that the New York Times or other media outlets in New York City are willing to cover these sorts of issues, the issue of BDS. And that's really significant. We've opened up a space by sort of allowing this like framing of art and critique and why are they protesting, to have a discussion about boycott and, more importantly, about what Israel is doing. So that said, I encourage people who are not sure whether they are wavering on the issue of cultural boycott or not sure where to start a campaign, to come to our breakout group. And similarly, I would urge people who are interested in figuring out how to target a culture, like who to target culturally, how to deal with that, how to pick your targets, how to research them, and what kind of actions you can sort of pursue, to come to the breakout group after, and also to visit adalany.org and see the video section where you can see some of the creative campaigns that have been done. Thank you.
Okay, I think I can use this mic here. I'm going to talk about specifically the churches, and as Andrew talked about the cultural aspects, more the economic, because that's where churches, for the most part, have been quite active. So, but I want to start with a couple of questions, because this panel has been really exciting to hear everyone else of a lot of effective things, and it's about effective and sharpening our BDS work. So let me just ask a couple questions to the audience to get started. How many folks have purchased a D9 bulldozer in the last 5 years? That's it. So can I say we have widespread effectiveness of our boycott of D9 bulldozers, okay? But somehow it's not quite getting traction yet. Let me ask, there's been an economic crisis. How many folks don't own any stock? Do we have a... All right, so look, we've already got divestment working. You guys have divested completely. So can we just acknowledge that there's like incredible movement, and we just need to claim this a lot more effectively and say, here we have all these folks who've already divested, so don't say it can't be done. So the question here is why churches should work on BDS, on boycott, divestment, and sanctions, and well, frankly, there's 3 reasons. One, experience. We've actually done it a lot, on lots of different issues. So if you think about the Taco Bell boycott, the Mount Olive boycott, or the lettuce boycott with farm workers, if you think about the boycotts relating to South Africa, or Nestle's boycott around infant formula, there are decades and decades of experience of churches, and there are victories. So I think you want to use a tactic that brings about real transformation. And boycott and divestment and sanctions, and I say that, try and say this to church groups especially, at least 5 to 10 times, and I learned a lot of this from Omar. It's moral, nonviolent economic action to change bad behavior. That's what it's about. We want to change the bad behavior of the Israeli government. We want to change the bad behavior of settlers. We want to change the bad behavior of companies like Caterpillar and others that are involved and complicit and profiting off these ugly human rights violations. And we're doing it in nonviolent, moral, economic ways. So that is really important as you're kind of trying to spread this, to spread the message. Then how are we best effective? I'm a New Yorker, so it's a little bit like Carnegie Hall. How do you get there? Practice, practice, practice. So we've just got to get folks in the churches to practice. Practice with boycotts, with divestment, and with sanctions. And here I'll just add a note that about sanctions. The U.S. record in the United Nations Security Council is a large part of why we have such a problem. Over half the vetoes the U.S. has cast, and it's cast more than the other 4 permanent members since 1970, when it cast its first veto, over half have been to block international criticism of Israeli human rights violations. What's less remembered now is that an additional 1/3 of US vetoes were to block criticism of apartheid regimes in Southern Africa, Rhodesia, South Africa, and South Africa's occupation of what's now Namibia. This is a shameful record for the US government, and that has blocked sanctions, and that's what led to people's movements turning to boycott and divestment over the years. So then finally, like, churches bring to this, like, a lot of practice. This is my third point on the churches. We first started boycotting about 2,000 years ago. There was a community organizer and migrant worker. He was named Apostle Paul, and he was traveling around the empire, and he was trying to mobilize folks, you know, to resist, like, the problems that they were facing. And so he wrote a letter. Letter writing is a key kind of part of this, and he sent it to the folks in Rome. And he said, the heart of the empire, he said, look, if there's something that you eat or something that you consume that harms a sister or brother, don't do it. Now, he didn't use the word boycott. I'm not quite sure what the Greek for that was 2,000 years ago, but he was basically saying, look, stop. If something you're consuming, now this is Romans 14, by the way, for those who, like, you know, carry Bibles around or want to check this later on. He was advocating a boycott as an expression of solidarity. And so I think that that's an important thing. The most exciting expression of that right now that is helping mobilize churches here in the United States and around the world is the Kairos Palestine document. And I don't know whether folks have heard about that or not, but please go to kairospalestine.ps. And you will see, actually it's in, I think 10 or more languages now it's been translated into. It's a message from Palestinian Christians. It calls for boycott, divestment, and sanctions actions. It's framed in a categorical rejection of violence. And what I love about it is BDS is framed as acts of resistance that one is morally obligated to as a faithful Christian. That if you are Christian, you are obligated to engage in resistance when you are faced with evil. But it is resistance as an act of love. That BDS are expressions of love and resistance for oneself, for one's neighbors, and even for one's enemies. So, you know, churches for a long time have been saying, make love, not war. Okay, so this is part of that. BDS is really an opportunity for us to make love and not war. Sadly, most Christian practice over the centuries has been making war and not love. But that's another panel. I'm sorry. Thank you. We're moving along. The big actions that are happening this year are really in the United Methodist Church and the Presbyterian Church. And so I do want to just touch on those. The United Methodist Church is a global church. We have about 11 million members in the United States. 35% of our members are Africans, Europeans, and Filipinos. So we are a global church, and that's a significant part of how we kind of bring this. Proposal number 2 is in your packet. It just so happens that United Methodists have what's on the table for us to divest from Caterpillar, Motorola, and Hewlett-Packard. And we've had an ecumenical action group of religious shareholders that had been meeting with these companies, or trying to meet with these companies, over the last 7 years. And I've been a part of those meetings. I've met with management of each of these 3 companies, and I can tell you there is no efforts to change practices. So we are engaged in moral, nonviolent actions, but the need for boycott, divestment, and sanctions is really compelling because the companies are not responding to polite conversations. And so that just needs to be acknowledged, that we're still making those conversations, but we're also recommending now, at what point do you keep saying this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and leave it only to words? And so this is a chance for United Methodists to put our feet and our money where our mouths are, and where they've been for many, many years, is to end our connection and complicity with companies that are profiting from and supporting and sustaining a military occupation and systematic discrimination and apartheid. So that meeting is going to be in late April, early May in Tampa, Florida, and we're looking for support. I'm now like fast forwarding because we've got like discussion later on. We don't want to take away from those small groups. The Presbyterians have a similar resolution that is coming forward, and last week there was a huge, huge victory of the next step in the journey, that after 7 years of engagement, their investment committee recommended to divest from Caterpillar, Motorola, and Hewlett-Packard. That will come to their meeting in July in 2012. So we have 2 big meetings of large denominations in the United States. That would be the largest decisions in terms of divestment so far. They're very huge in the United States. And so we want your support, prayers, feet on the ground. And I hope those of you who, whether you're church-based or not, that's some of the stuff that we'll try and focus on and discuss in the panel afterwards. Thank you.
That's a noise.
So let's give one more round of applause to this amazing So I'll try to be brief. A couple things, just logistics-wise. Actually, the first thing I wanted to say, inspired by Ms. Twitter here, we do have a hashtag for following this conference. We'll be using End the Occupation. It's our general one, but if any of you guys are on Twitter right now, if you could use hashtag End the Occupation, all one word. So right now we're doing a breakout session, but before, I was going to gather us all at the end, but I think I'll just tell you some of the logistics for lunch now to give a full hour for your breakout sessions. And so what's going to happen is people are going to be dividing up, and I'll explain more about that. But at the end of the hour, at 1 o'clock, is when lunch will be here, hopefully, and everyone can go grab a sandwich or whatever and hurry scuttle to get to one of the lunch sessions, which you'll see on your program. And one of the lunch sessions is with Omar Barghouti. It's for Students for Justice in Palestine. And I just want to stress very much that this is for the students to be consulting with Omar. And if there are people from a campus community who would like to come and sort of audit, then that's fine if you're faculty or staff. But that really is a time for students to be consulting with him. So now there's this great opportunity to split up into breakout sessions for people who, let's say, with Dalit want to learn more about building local campaigns around local targets and doing that research to have that local angle and build it up. For people who want to learn more about the TIAA-CREF campaign and the strategies that went into that, can meet with Rebecca. Those who are working on campus BDS or want to know how to start doing that can meet with Tory. With Nancy, learning about creative tactics to keep your campaigns alive and the amazing victories they've had so far. People who are still curious and maybe learning more about cultural boycott or what it would mean to start a campaign yourselves. And then those who are interested in the incredible work that's happening now with churches and how to contribute to that, meeting with David. So I'm going to name where each of the panelists will be, and you can choose which session you'd like to go to.
You're going to tweet?
So, Dalit, and these will be facilitated by steering committee and staff members of the U.S. campaign. So Dalit's group will be with Peter Miller in the conference room number 1. Tory's group will be with Felicia Eves in the Heritage Room, which, if you don't know, is down the hall and to your left right before the door. Andrew, Nancy, Rebecca, and David's group will be here in this big room. Let's put Andrew's group here with me, Nancy's group over in that corner with Mike Coogan from the U.S. campaign staff, Rebecca Subar is with Jim Haber over there, and David's here with Phyllis Banks. So here's for a productive breakout session where you can build some skills and get some ideas and plans to bring back to your local communities. The whole thing?
No, just a location.
All right, so Dalit's room in conference room. Dalit is in conference room 1, Tory in the Heritage Room, Andrew, Nancy, Rebecca, David. All right, hope it's fruitful.
So I would like to thank the panelists.
Sorry, please don't leave. Omar wanted to say a few words.
I just want to thank the panelists, really. Nothing to add. It's just wonderful what you're doing, and we've really come a long way. It really makes us feel like the South Africa moment has arrived. Thank you.